Okay, Peter, so kind of shock of the weekend was the Kiko Martinez victory over Kid Galahad. Kiko Martinez scoring a big knockdown in the 5th round after being dominated for 4 rounds and then stopping the fight emphatically in the 6th. And, you know, obviously there was a lot of talk before the fight about, you know, Kiko shouldn't really be in the other corner against Kid Galahad. He was 35 years old. He had 10 losses. His best days had come a long time ago. You know, he won the IBF Super Bantamweight title in 2013, was beaten by Carl Frampton in 2014. And since then, you know, has really kind of lost to all the top guys at Super Bantam and Feather. And so really, you know, the saying was that he had why on earth he wasn't ranked by anybody but the IBF after a sort of, you know, surprise one-off victory a while ago. So why was he in the opposite corner against Kid Galahad? And this was a gimme fight for Galahad. It obviously turned out not to be that. And it was just interesting to me. It just made me think, you know, this is the away fighter comes in, and this is sometimes the great thing about boxing. You know, one of the bad things is sometimes you get the home and away fighter and it's too predictable who's going to win. It's too predictable, you know, going in, you almost know the result of the fight before the first bell has started. And we also had another upset on that card when Terry Harper suffered her first pro defeat to Alicia Baumgartner and lost her WBC title in the 4th round. And so again, away fighters coming in and taking that victory, and it, you know, kind of makes boxing exciting, you know, and makes it happen. But I thought, you know, to be a bit patriotic, I thought, you know, just got me thinking about the best 5 or the top 5 victories of British fighters going away as the away fighter abroad and winning. And so I thought I'd run through my personal top 5. So if anybody objects to these, you know, I'm just going to go through them. They're a personal selection for various reasons that I'll outline. So number 5 is Danny Williams against Mike Tyson. Now, people might not think this is a major victory because it wasn't for a major title. So this is June 2004, but it's a personal favourite. So basically, Tyson was still Tyson in these days. This was 2004. He had lost to Lennox Lewis in 2002, but then he came back and fought Clifford Etienne, got rid of him in 49 seconds. There was talk of a Lewis rematch. And, you know, Tyson said, I need a couple of tune-up fights. Then Lewis beat Vladimir Klitschko and then retired. So there was talk of Tyson against Vladimir Klitschko. And in the meantime, Tyson thought he'd take a tune-up. So he fought this. Nobody had ever heard of Danny Williams in America. So he brought in Danny. Danny had 3 losses on his record. And, you know, the fight was set for America. There's a great story about this. Talking to Jim McDonnell a few years ago, I remember him saying they went to America for a 2-week training camp before the fight. Jim brought in some sparring partners. The main sparring partner, I can't remember his name now, but the main guy that Jim brought in said $500 a day. I want you to do 3 rounds a day with Danny. And this sparring partner said, look, man, I'll do 10, 12 rounds a day. It's no problem. You know what I mean? I'll give you a guy good work. He said, no, I want you to do 3 rounds a day. And I don't want you to talk to Danny Williams. Do not speak to him. If he talks to you, completely ignore him. He's got enough mates. He doesn't need any more mates. And he said, also, I'll pay you $500 a day. I've got 10 grand in cash. If you knock Danny Williams out in those sparring sessions, you get the 10 grand. Okay? So that's the deal. So the guy said, yeah, you're paying the money. That's what I do. So every day this guy came to camp. Danny would talk to him, say hello. He would just sneer at him, not do anything. And then the sparring started, and he would go hell for leather at Danny, swinging everything, trying to knock him out. You know, and after 3 rounds, Jim would say, right, how'd you get? And Danny would say, no, let's do a few more. You know, and Jim would say, no, that's it, off you go. Danny came to Jim and said, I want this guy out of the camp. He's ignorant, he's stupid, he comes in every day trying to knock my head off. I want rid of him. And Jim said, no, it's good sparring, Danny, let's do it. Let's keep with him. Anyway, they did keep with him. Of course, what happens when the fight comes? Tyson will not speak to Danny. He's surly, you know, he sneers at him. And of course, he comes running at him for 3 rounds. And, you know, it looked like Danny was going to go in the first round. He was staggered twice, had to hold. In the second round, you know, pretty much the same, although Danny did manage to get in some blows of his own. You know, in the 3rd round, Danny was starting to come into the fight a bit, but he was deducted 2 points. So basically, he'd lost the first 3 rounds convincingly. He came out in the 4th round. Tyson's fire had gone out. You know, Jim McDonnell was bang on the money. Tyson was a 3-round fighter. If he didn't get you out of there, and Danny was conditioned to not be got out of there through that sparring, Danny took over. Massive unanswered barrage in the 4th, and Danny Williams won, the 9-1 underdog that nobody ever heard of. Effectively ended Mike Tyson, or the myth of Mike Tyson there and then. You know, Danny went on to fight Vladimir Klitschko, you know, and got stopped in the 8th round after that fight. And Tyson went on to fight Kevin McBride, and, you know, and then just call it a day after that. But effectively, it was the shattering, the end of the myth of Tyson. And it was an amazing win for Danny. And like I say, a personal favourite of mine. So that I put in at number 5. Number 4, I put Nigel Ben versus Doug Dewitt. Now, this was April 1990. And as you know, Nigel Ben's been down here, Peter, a few times. You know, he's quite a favourite of mine, and we've talked about this fight. So Ben had lost to Watson. after having been knocking everybody out. Then he lost to Watson. He looked like he'd basically, when he couldn't blow people away, anybody that was a bit more technical boxer was going to take care of him. His chin looked a bit suspect. Effectively Watson ended that fight with a jab. Instead of going for the rematch, Ben went to America to try and rebuild, got a shot against Doug Dewitt. Now, Doug Dewitt was a tough guy. He was very experienced. He was kind of iron-chinned. He'd been against all the top people. He'd just won the newly minted WBO middleweight title, and he took on Ben. And Ben was a big underdog in this fight. It was really a kind of shit or bust thing for Ben to kind of gate crash the world stage, or just be seen as someone that who really the Watson fight would underline that he wasn't really a world class fighter. So he fought Doug Dewitt, went in. It was a cracking fight. It's really worth watching on YouTube. They're both really going for it. They both land left hooks simultaneously early on, and Ben is down. But Ben comes storming back, and he finally scores an 8th round KO, and he is now established on the world stage. He's got that world title. DeWitt only went on to fight one more time. Ben went on to beat up Iran Barkley in the next fight, which really established himself. Then he came over to take care of one little bit of unfinished business with Chris Eubank, and we know what happened there. So but this was the real establishment of Nigel Ben on the world stage. It was a big risk to go to fight an established guy like Doug Dewitt, and it came off for him. So in my list, John H. Tracy against Joseph Napoles. Now this is the only one on here that is kind of a bit before my time. This was December 1975, but a big fan of John H. It's well worth watching the fight. So John H. went to Mexico City to fight an established champion in Joseph Napoles. Joseph Napoles has been reigning on and off for about 6 years. It was in a bull ring in Mexico City in stifling heat. So, the boy from Bethnal Green wasn't really expected to last the course, one, with such a quality operator, and two, in that stifling heat, in the afternoon heat, in that bull ring. The atmosphere was supposed to be amazing. 40,000 fanatical Joseph Napoles fans in Mexico City screaming for Tracy's blood. I'm told reliably there were 23 Londoners that made it against those 40,000, and first off, it looked like it was going to go kind of to the way it was supposed to go. He was down in the first round, John H, but he managed to fight his way back into the fight. Made it quite a brutal, quite a physical fight. At the end of the 6th round, Napoles' eye was closing, went back to his stall and didn't come out for the 7th. And John H. Tracy was world champion. Again, a big risk for him to go abroad. He was European champion at that point, but had a few losses on his record. Big risk to go there and take that chance, and it came off, and he became WBC world champion. Number 2, more recent times, November 2015, Tyson Fury against Vladimir Klitschko. This was an amazing victory, and it's kind of somewhat overshadowed by Tyson's descent afterwards, and then his amazing return. But if we look back to 2015, when he really first established himself on the world stage, Vladimir Klitschko had a 10-year reign. Really since beating Chris Bird in 2006, early 2006, to win his first world heavyweight title. Had cleaned out the division multiple times, really. The only fighter that really could stand with him was his brother, who was never going to fight and was now retired. So Klitschko stood alone and stood high. And Fury came in, and it was seen as, he's obviously not going to win this. It's just going to be another one that Klitschko bowls over. Fury was never intimidated. It was interesting how he really didn't play the game with Klitschko. The Klitschkos were kind of notorious for doing everything professionally, doing everything well, being very polite. You came and fought on their K2 promotion show in a big football stadium in Germany. They called all the shots, and they got the victory. And Tyson didn't really want to play along with that. He wasn't playing second fiddle. I think he did kind of get in Vladimir's head a little bit before the fight, and even right up to the fight. On the day of the fight, Fury was like, no, I'm not happy with the gloves. I'm not fighting if we're fighting those gloves. I want different gloves. Then there was a load of shenanigans about the underlay, foam under the ring. Again, they were like, no, we're not coming out unless you remove 2 inches of that foam under the ring, because that they thought was designed to slow Tyson down, because they thought their advantage was speed of foot with Tyson, as it proved to be. So the underlay under the ring was removed. Finally, all their demands were met. He came out and was absolutely inspired. Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko that night with feints. It was amazing. The head movement was incredible, and Vladimir just couldn't get that jab going, couldn't get it connecting, which meant for Vladimir, he couldn't fire his right hand. And so, Tyson, although a lot of the fight was feints and slips and movement, Tyson's movement was incredible. He was switching, and he just seemed to bamboozle Klitschko. And cruised his way to a unanimous decision victory. And then, we know the Tyson story from there, you know, and incredible as it is, and still going. But that was a really amazing night, you know, and an incredible thing to go to an established champion's backyard and beat him convincingly, you know, in that backyard. But number one for me through this list, and this is one I do remember, September 1986, Lloyd Hannigan against Donald Curry. Now, Donald Curry at this time was, you know, almost unsurpassed. Talked about being the pound number one. He was world welterweight champion, unified world welterweight champion. In those days, that meant WBC, WBA, and IBF. And he had won that at a canter. You know, he had beaten guys, stopped guys like Milton McCrory, Marlon Starling. You know, he had absolutely wiped the floor with these guys, but it looked like he wasn't even hardly trying. There was talk about Donald Curry moving up in weight from welterweight to middleweight and fighting Marvin Hagler, you know, to give him a challenge, because it seemed like, so obvious. There were some rumours that he was struggling at the welterweight limit. But anyway, in the meantime, he was going to fight a mandatory challenger in Lloyd Hannigan. So Lloyd Hannigan was a massive underdog, came over with Mickey Duff, given absolutely no chance. But again, a bit like Tyson, just had this incredible confidence. And, you know, all the time we're talking about, no, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. Everybody wrote him off. The press wrote him off. You know, all the bookies wrote him off. All the Vegas people wrote him off. And you've got to also remember back in this time, British and European fighters going up against top American fighters. The result was, you know, 99 times out of 100, the top American fighter won. You know, the styles were different, and you know, it was seen as more stand-up straight, you know, sort of jab style from the British and European fighters, and the Americans were more swarming, hooking fighters. So, you know, this was seen as, you know, something that was only going to go one way. But Lloyd had different ideas. He put a load of money on himself before the fight. And, you know, I think he got 8-1 with the Vegas bookies and almost put his entire purse on it. And he went for Curry from the opening round, absolutely went for him, roughed him up, you know, ragged him around, pulled him about, you know, just kept hitting him. He almost didn't let him in the fight. And it kind of just went one way until at the end of the 6th round, you know, Curry retired on his stool, you know, having just been absolutely beaten up for 6 rounds. And it was incredible. I always remember Mickey Duff jumping in the ring and rolling around on the floor with Lloyd Hannigan. And the weird thing is, I can remember watching that. I was just turned 16 at the time, and I heard the result on the news in the morning that Lloyd Hannigan had won. And I honestly thought to myself, this can't be right. And in those days, obviously, we didn't have all the pay-per-view, we didn't have anything else. And I had to watch it on BBC Grandstand later in the afternoon. So I'm watching a fight that I know the result of. It's the only way to watch it. And I literally was thinking, they must have got this wrong on the news. This can't unfold in this way. Such was the sort of magnitude of Curry. And so I watched that fight unfold, almost not believing that the result was going to be as I'd been told, until I actually saw it with my own eyes. So that, to me, was the best victory for a British fighter abroad. I just thought that was a little recap. You know, I know Kiko Martinez victory is the topical thing, Peter, but I just thought I'd recap, you know, when the away fighter goes away, and give it a bit of interest, a bit of patriotic interest, when it's the British fighter that goes away, and all these amazing victories that we've had. And it, you know, reminds us of the beauty of boxing, and sometimes the unpredictability of boxing, you know, which makes it so compelling. You know, that these guys can come in as the underdog and can score the victories. So, you know, overall, I think it was good for boxing, even if it was bad for British boxing. But Kid Galahad will come again. I'm sure Eddie will sort the rematch out. And yeah, it's all good. Another great weekend of boxing. And a little bit of reminiscing from me. Cheers, Peter.